My name is Evan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Yuma. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Digital Currency Group. I'm coming to you all the way from New York City. Before we get into the World Wide Web of AI, I guess show of hands, who's heard of Bittensor? One hand. Awesome. So two hands, fantastic. So this is great. I hope everyone learned something today. All right, so let's take a step back. Every era within the crypto digital asset industry has ushered in different levels of innovation, obviously the first one being Bitcoin. But since then, we started to see the altcoins emerge, like Litecoin and Ripple. But not too far along after that, Ethereum launched. Ethereum brought us smart contracts, which enabled us to rethink capital formation. That brought us the ICO frenzy, which had a lot of successes. We learned a lot of lessons. It was a bit of a wild ride, but it enabled future things like DeFi. It also enabled NFTs. We even saw the meme coin craze come after that. But most recently, we're seeing a lot more excitement around the intersection of AI and Web3. Personally, I think this is the next big era for crypto and could be as big, if not bigger, than Bitcoin. So this is probably not a surprise to you, but there has been record-breaking investment into the AI industry over the last few years. But despite this record-breaking investment, the benefits only flow to a small number of dominant centralized players. And so that centralization poses a lot of risks, right? AI lacks transparency, it's controlled by the gatekeepers, and the next era of networks that will be built in AI belong to those that are open source and permissionless. And so we need to find a way to move from the risks of centralization to the potential and unlock that potential for decentralized AI. And that's where Bittensor comes in. So what is Bittensor? It's a decentralized AI network that incentivizes the contribution of data, compute, and intelligence to drive AI model training and fine-tuning. It is an open platform and permissionless to build any business or application. And it is powered by a native underlying cryptocurrency called Tau. What's unique about Tau compared to other cryptocurrencies out there is it's very much like Bitcoin. There's only 21 million tokens. Every 4 years, it halves. There was no venture-backed fundraising. Just like Bitcoin, it was a fair launch off of a white paper, and a community started to form organically around it. There were no allocations to advisors, the team, or founders, or anything like that. And network participants receive token distributions for their work. At the current Tau price, on an annualized basis, those emissions are roughly $1 billion a year that are up for grabs for builders. And so one of the biggest critiques of Bittensor is that it's very, very difficult to understand. If you asked the two people in this room that know what it is, you'd probably get two different answers. And so similarly, what we did with the World Wide Web and how that opened up access to information, we believe Bittensor will open up access to intelligence. So what do I mean by this? In the early 90s, if you wanted to get online, you really only had two choices, AOL or Prodigy. It wasn't until, in 1994, Mark Andreessen launched the Netscape Mosaic browser, and this ushered in a Cambrian explosion of new websites, businesses throughout the dot-com era. Now, many of these flamed out, but there's also some juggernauts that still exist today, like your Googles and your Amazons. But over the next 20 years, these businesses eventually transformed to the tech companies we know, like the Uber, Netflix, and Instagrams of the world. And if you look back to the early 90s, you have to ask yourself the question, would an Uber have ever been possible if the internet was gatekept by two companies? And so when we think about AI, in 2022, we had the ChatGPT moment. And similarly, in 2022, the Bittensor network launched. Since then, there's over 120 different subnets or applications on the protocol. And over the next decade or 20 years, under the same context, we have no idea what future applications can be created with this open source technology. And so let's take it a level slightly deeper as to the network participants within Bittensor. So there's 4 key network participants within the ecosystem. Subnets are like your competition organizers. They define a problem, they set the parameters for that problem, and they outsource that work to miners who are like your athletes, right? So they go and compete to provide the intelligence or solve the problems set forth by the subnet owner. And your validator are like your judges. So they decide who performed the best work or the worst work, and token holders or stakers, the 4th one, allocate their weights or incentives accordingly. So you have competition organizers, you have your competitors, your judges, and your token holders. Yuma specifically sits at the intersection of all 4 of these. We run a subnet accelerator for new businesses trying to launch on the Bittensor network. In-house, we run miners with our AI and ML team. We run a validator as well, and most recently announced an asset management business for institutional token holders to navigate the ecosystem. Over the last 12 months, this ecosystem has just exploded. Over 2.5 times the number of subnets, as well as a market cap growing from effectively 0 to almost $1 billion in roughly 100 days. So we talked about funding at the onset of this presentation. Let's bring it back to the funding within Web3 specifically. In 2024 in the US, there was roughly $32 billion of venture capital money deployed into Web2 AI, compared to roughly $400 million into Web3 AI. It's roughly 1%, or on a unit basis, roughly 3 to 1 for every transaction. Now, if you introduce the Bittensor incentive design, that changes to over 4.6 more capital available to teams than the entire Web3 venture capital industry in 2024. And that closes that unit economic basis to roughly 2.1. So I just want to really underscore how powerful the protocol has been over the last year in driving more than 4 times more incentives or dollars through the token to builders than the entire Web3 VC industry. With that, I'll conclude. If you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Twitter to learn more. You can come find me after this, but I want to leave you with one critical takeaway. Bittensor is a non-sovereign, global, hard cap supply, immutable, and decentralized incentive mechanism that will drive open source innovation. I know that's a lot of words, but each one of them is very critically important because few large tech giants control what could be the greatest technology in humanity, and Bittensor is a permissionless alternative for the world. Thank you.